Yo, is Jay-Z overrated is becoming a more common expression in hip-hop conversations recently. This sort of debate has been raging on for years and years, but it seems to be reappearing once again amongst younger audiences. This sentiment then causes older hip-hop heads to come in like the hand of God and try and smite anyone that dares question their greatest rapper of all time. I personally like to think that when people are having an opinion-based debate like this, they are really having two separate conversations about Jay as an artist, and when put together, it makes you both look like idiots. But it's hip-hop. Why would you bother taking the time to understand a differing opinion? So let's have a discussion about if Jay-Z is actually overrated from both sides.
Now tuned into the motherfucking greatest.
Now on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, you're likely to see people trashing claims that Jay-Z is the greatest rapper of all time in favor of people like Kanye West or Lil Wayne. Or, if you meet some really rowdy white people, they're likely to tell you that Eminem is the greatest rapper of all time. You'll often hear arguments like, well, nobody listens to Jay-Z's music anymore, or he isn't bigger than so-and-so, or nobody's playing Jay-Z in the club. Much like how in this semi-viral TikTok, this guy will break down how Jay-Z was never the hottest or best artist in any given year during his peak, but I'll save that for later. So if you read between the lines, they are complaining about a lack of exposure towards Jay-Z's music within general everyday life. And there's two vital reasons for that. One of them actually has to do with overexposure, and one of them has to do with title, and that's where I'm gonna start. Streaming services as of now are the lifeblood of music consumption, and for a good portion of the mid to late 2010s, Jay-Z was barely present on any streaming services except for Tidal, mainly due to owning the company. Now, if you're a Kanye fan, I'm gonna put it in a way so you'll understand the problem with that. Does anyone talk about Donda 2 when discussing Kanye's music? I mean, it fully released on Kanye's $250 vibrator and was the main selling point to go along with it. Now, why is it that people don't talk about that album at all? Because outside of diehard fans, exclusivity doesn't mean anything if similar content is available elsewhere. In fact, to keep using the Kanye example, he was also exclusively signed to Tidal too way back when, until he breached his contract, which has irreparably damaged the relationship between Kanye and Jay till this day. So for Jay-Z to only within the past few years release all of his catalog onto Spotify and Apple Music, it was pretty much too little too late, as withholding his music caused damage towards the promotion and connection that people had with his projects in the first place. As well, this gap in time where there was less access to Jay-Z's music basically made it so that a generation couldn't care less about him. If it isn't easily accessible to them, they aren't going to go out of their way to try and find it. And with how late his music ended up on streaming services, it ensured this problem was permanent. Tidal was just a terrible idea all around. Sorry to Tidal users, make better choices. So if there's a block of time where people can't easily access your music, they're going to build bigger affinities with other artists of a similar standard. Yet, if your name is still constantly being brought up as the greatest rapper of all time, then question marks and the who are you even syndrome is going to start festering. If you follow hip-hop for even a short period of time, you know who Jay-Z is, but that doesn't necessarily mean you've heard his music. And does this disconnect cause people to think Jay-Z hasn't earned his place?
You bet your ass it does.
Jay often gets mentioned alongside Beyonce in the media. He gets brought up in any legal dispute that any rapper is having, even if it's just about a cat getting stuck in a tree. Hell, he even gets invited to work with the NFL and the Super Bowl, and that information spreads like wildfire. He's a widely publicized figure, and we as a society are often overexposed to hearing about him. So if you don't have an attachment to him or his music, people become resentful and hateful, because why should they care about hearing about someone they don't recognize nor feel connected to? People generally just love to hate success that they aren't a part of. Overall, though, you can't really blame younger generations too much for not thinking Jay-Z is as great as he should be considered. When a lot of them were growing up, they probably didn't have access to his music, and now they could care less to go back in time to listen to an artist they have no attachment to. You can, though, take issues with some of the statements being made about Jay-Z from people who should know better.
Yeah, I'm out at Brooklyn. Now I'm down in Tribeca, right?
So that being said, I want to go back to that video claiming that Jay-Z has never been the hottest or outright best rapper in any year in which he was at his peak. There are two key issues with this video that I want to break down, and both have to do with using the wrong types of measurements for success. Now, my man in the video mentions names like Ludacris and 50 Cent in the respective years where they sold more albums than Jay-Z. Now, 50 I totally understand, and no disrespect to him, but at the same time, when people talk about 50 Cent, they are mostly talking about Get Rich or Die Trying, and that's about it for their knowledge of his music. One album for his entire career, really. Same with Ludacris. In terms of his music, I don't know anyone who would say that Ludacris has had a better career musically than Jay-Z. You're making an argument for the best rapper of any given year in a conversation with Jay-Z, and sure, you can have the opinion that he doesn't outright stand out in any of those years, but he stands out across the entire decade, whereas most of those rappers don't. Let me hit you with some history. Alright, so in 2001, Jay-Z drops The Blueprint. Ooh, masterpiece. Ooh, 2002, guess what? Blueprint 2. He then retired after the release of the Black Album in 2003, but while taking time away, signed Kanye West to Rockefeller Records, and then came out of retirement, dropped Kingdom Come and American Gangster in 2006 and 2007, and then boom, Blueprint 3 in 2009. Cherry on top of this whole thing is that in 2011, Jay alongside Kanye West dropped the most iconic collab rap album of all time called Watch the Throne. I think they talk about a couple of fellas in Paris on that album, if I'm not mistaken. Masterpiece. Do you know how many hit albums I just mentioned? Too many for these kids to be making these bogus claims about Jay-Z, man. Come on! And also, how are you going to use sales to justify who the hottest rapper is? That's like saying like a soccer team that makes the most money in a year is the best team in the world. A lot of things happen in a year that are a lot bigger than album sales. Has any other rapper performed the same song 12 times in a row and had the crowd screaming the lyrics each time? I think not.
I invented sweat. Popping bottles, putting
You can't simplify Jay-Z down to one or two facets of his career. You have to take into consideration his larger impacts if you're going to claim that he isn't the best rapper of all time. But again, that's not often the conversation being had here. The thing you gotta understand is that if someone says that no one listens to Jay-Z anymore, and you respond with, well yeah, but The Blueprint is a classic album and Jay-Z is a legend, you are making a non-argument, and that has no relevancy in this conversation. And that's probably how you feel about that whole rant that I just had. But for those trying to criticize Jay-Z's career or his stature in hip-hop, I personally believe they have really stupid observations, or just a general lack of understanding of his legacy. I think the thing for me that classifies Jay-Z as being the greatest of all time is the fact that he wasn't signed to a major record label until he was 27 years old. Everybody passed up on him, yet he kept pushing and maintained the self-belief that he could get somewhere with his music.
My first album came out in '96, and it was like, and I had to put the album out myself. Nobody would sign me. They thought I was terrible. Every single record, I went to every single record label. They was like, this guy's terrible.
And that's super inspirational. To see where he's at now, having a net worth of over $2.5 billion, being married to Beyonce, being a stakeholder of the Knicks, and I could keep naming cool shit, he literally gives you the blueprint on how you can go from having nothing to having it all, if you put the work in. I mean, you don't get to hang around with the likes of Biggie if you don't have the skills to hang. But it seems like people want to start talking about how he doesn't deserve his placement. It's almost like you have to die to get that sort of respect. And I can understand that music is a lot more stat-based now, and that it would be the thing that people point to when deciding who the quote-unquote best is. And I think that sales are definitely important to consider. You could also argue that in terms of technical ability, Jay-Z might not be the greatest lyricist of all time. But should we be basing who the greatest rapper of all time is off of who sells the most, or who uses a double entendre the best? If that's the case, then Drake has been the best rapper of all time for years now. Or if it's skill-based, then some random guy working at a grocery store is actually the best rapper of all time. If the question was asking for who is the most commercial or most popular rapper of all time, I'd agree. But I don't think greatest rapper of all time coincides or is a fitting title just because of sales success. Nor should it be based on skills, because you can be highly skilled but have no impact. I'd argue that the true GOAT is somebody who blends all of these things together. I see being considered the best as being not only good at producing and creating music, but also being the embodiment and representative of that art form. And that is what Jay-Z is for hip-hop currently. And it's also part of the reason I don't think you can ever call Eminem the greatest rapper of all time, but that's for another video. The impact Jay has created in the culture, not to mention the direct contributions he's had to it by identifying and giving a platform to young and talented artists like Kanye and J. Cole, coinciding with a music catalog that almost any artist would dream of having, and still managing to maintain recognition across multiple decades, makes him one of, if not the greatest rapper of all time. So is Jay-Z overrated? No. If anything, he started to become underappreciated. I think that's down to a little bit of a generational gap and outright jealousy. When you get to the top, everyone thinks you're looking down at them, and it can often make people resentful. And if that's the case, put that energy into actually bettering yourself. That's just my vibe though. Let me know who you would consider to be the greatest rapper of all time in the comments below.
Things don't happen to you, they happen for you. That's life. Everything is life. It happens for